Because, baby, you know when you see that person walk in, woo, and they're wearing a 2600 hat, you've got a very special person walking in that room. Woo, because that's a symbol of quality. That's a seal of approval. That's saying, hey, this person knows what the fuck they're talking about. Woo! And of course, the Golden Stallion is here for you, wearing my 2600 hat. And I am ready. Oh, I am ready for some Sovryn tech. That's right, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, the man that some call, the most interesting man in anarchism today. And I gotta tell you, has the past couple of days been a wild ride, and I don't want to let any cats out of the bag. But man, like literally yesterday. So this is getting recorded. What do we got here? 12/10, December 10th, 2016. Yesterday, December 9th. It was just wall to wall. It was non-stop podcasting. I'm not going to tell you what all those podcasts were, but most of them weren't mine. I mean, it just went all day long. And then here I am, finally get home, about 2:30, 3 a.m. And now here we are. It's like 10 o'clock. Oh, man. You can't stop this action, but I need a little caffeine. And if you'll just excuse me for a second, I'm going to have some fine Earl Grey right here. That's the good stuff. So, hostess. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so I'm in the studio, as I've mentioned on some of the Patreon episodes, and if you want to become a Sovryn Tech patron, just, had some more sign up this week. Thank you so much. We're getting very close to reaching our goals. Very, very pleased with that. If you want to become a patron, of course, all you have to do is go to sovryntech.com. That takes you right to the Patreon page. Okay, right there, because you get to show, by becoming a patron, you get to show that you support independent media, and I like to think very entertaining media at that, of course, with Sovryn Tech and so many others. I've seen a lot of people really get on board with Patreon, and I'm glad. Now, can you fund everybody? No, of course not. But with Sovryn Tech, of course, $1 a month. That's all that's being asked. Some people do more. Some people do a whole hell of a lot more. And I thank you, and I love you for it. Thank you so much. You really, you make a lot of this go round and round. But anyway, something I had mentioned on Patreon was that, I had some some really bad computer troubles. And for one of the first times in my life, I didn't have a bunch of backup parts to really get, things back up and running quickly. But hopefully this weekend, I mean, that's all going to be resolved as far as that goes. But man, has it been, so some of the, a lot of the things that I want to work on and get out there have been delayed. That's the reason I bring this up, have been delayed just because, I thought it was my big rig. I thought it was the power supply, because everything starts going up in smoke. Then come to find out it's the motherboard. And then I get a new I get a new power supply, I get a new motherboard. And then it's like, oh shit, look at that. The video card's not flying anymore. What the hell else is going on here? And so you kind of want to start from square one with a lot of that. Fortunately, a hard drive's fine and I can get everything off of that. But, life without a big rig. That, a computer with some serious power, you feel it. I think I said this on a Patreon recently. I was saying, it's like, look, you hear about this post PC world, and believe me, the Golden Stallion, as a tech journalist, I have tried to, do this whole thing where, oh yeah, we could just run we could run everything off of a phone. This is great. Bullshit. You cannot like that. Just, if you're a creative, if you're somebody, that really puts out a lot of content. Now, if you're a blogger, I guess you could get away with it because, if you're just writing, and please, that's no slight. I know what it's like to be a blogger, a daily blogger at that. And, writing's hard. If you just need to do writing, yeah, you could use almost anything. Right, you could get away with using a Hemingway, or what do they call Astra House now? They don't call them Hemingways anymore. Or maybe they do. Anyway, you could get away with very, very simple hardware. As to where, if you want to do pretty much anything other than that, oh man, you really need a powerful machine to make that go round and round. especially if you end up like working with clients and all that. So yeah, that whole post PC world thing, go to hell. like that's not happening. But I do want to get into a story where, wow, the PC world is going to shake up. But before I do that, I want to touch on another little bit of a story, which this is something that I really see, and this is a subject I love to talk about because it's one of the, I don't want to say it's rare. There's lots of technologies that I'm very, very excited for. Of course, last week, hell, if you didn't hear it, talk about something exciting. You got Zcash, right? I mean, we had Paige Peterson here, the amazing, lovely Pixel. Oh, that was a great time, was it not? Well, I know you think it was because I got the emails. You loved it. But, one of the other technologies that I get really excited about is virtual reality. And, I know a lot of people, I mean, we've talked virtual reality a ton of times over the years on Sovereign Tech. In fact, I think there was an episode, maybe it was like episode 98 or something like that of Sovereign Tech, which this is episode 203. Oh yeah, baby. But episode 98, it was called Virtual Reality Hour 1. And, that was over 3 years ago. That was about 3 years ago. So, virtual reality, that's something we've been really keeping a close eye on for a long time. We've talked about it for a long time. And I know a lot of people, especially in tech news, who are like, well, this is just kind of a gimmick. This is sort of a flash in the pan, blah, 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 blah. And I've said, no, it's really not. And of course, a lot of that has been, I think, very much proven by the fact that, like at the recent Microsoft event, not WinHack, which we're going to talk about because a game-changing thing happened there. Not that I want to talk about Microsoft all the time, but they're the ones. And talk about something that other tech news is finally admitting is that, look, the only people doing anything interesting as far as hardware and sometimes even software is Microsoft. Okay, so that's why it comes up. It's not like everybody likes Microsoft. In fact, the people that say that don't use Windows 10, but they're just saying that they are the people doing something fucking interesting in this space, as far as like, the PC realm in particular, right? Anyway, so, just to prove, in my opinion, because at that Windows, Windows, what did they call it? The Windows hardware event, whatever, at the end of October, what we talked about, our analysis on Sovereign Tech was like, look, they laid the groundwork, the infrastructure, the framework, the tools to create this, either virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality, or merged reality, whatever term people want to go with. I hate the fact that there's so many terms. I get the difference between VR and AR, and I kind of get the concept of mixed reality, but like, it's just getting stupid now with the way it's like, it's that dumbass Silicon Valley, fucking tropes where they're like, it's like, well, we're not doing merged reality. We're talking about enhanced reality. Or, they come up with a new term for something that people have been talking about already forever, but just to make them feel like they're special or important, they make up an entirely new term, which is just totally meaningless and kind of goes to really their how far they've fallen from the developer, programmer, hacker ethos, which is you get rid of the non-essentials. And coming up with new terms is fucking non-essential a lot of times. Now, I mean, there's times where you need a new term, but in this case, that's not one of them. So anyway, Microsoft is really, they are providing all of the tools for people to create this, I'll just say mixed reality future where it's, either AR or VR, because both are going to be a part of the game. Now, that aside, now we have, and interestingly, Microsoft is not on this list. There is what has been created. It's called the Global VR Association, the Global Virtual Reality Association. And you have Google, HTC, Oculus, which is effectively Facebook, Samsung, and Sony. And they've all joined forces to create this Global VR Association. Now, doing so, really the only thing to say about the story, and we are getting into, we've just broken right into what, of course, we now call the foreplay, where it's all those little tech stories, all those little tidbits of tech news before we get into the main story. And this week I am going to be running like we're not going to do breaks. We're just going to run this whole thing. We're going to go 2 hours strong. Okay. As I've kind of done the past couple weeks too, largely because of the issues I described earlier. But anyway, the story here is that there's two parts to it. One is that, look, these kind of associations, these kind of partnerships, okay, and co-ops don't get created, unless there's something really big going on. I mean, Google doesn't work with Sony. Google working with HTC isn't that odd. Google working with Samsung, not necessarily that odd. But to work with effectively Oculus, again, when you read Oculus, read Facebook, right? That's what that is. When you have Google working with Sony and Facebook, I mean, maybe working with Sony is not too strange, but definitely Google and Facebook coming together is a very odd one. And also it's interesting that HTC and Oculus are kind of working together. So, I mean, I just think that this lends so much credence to the fact that, look, virtual reality is not a flash in the pan. You're not getting associations like this made for Internet of Things, right? Like with IoT, you don't really have this sort of, conglomerate kind of, or not conglomerate, because it's not like all these companies are becoming one or anything. It's just that they're kind of a shared pool now, perhaps of ideas and some technologies and standards. And that's what's, of course, going to come out of this is there's going to be VR standards. Once you start to develop standards, then a lot of other little companies, kind of latch on to that and sort of grow out of it. Not to say that you want like a monoculture of standards, but that won't be happening in this case. So, my point, the number one point here is that, look, VR is fucking serious. Okay. Mixed reality, AR, all that, it's serious as a heart attack. It's here. It's getting built. That future is coming. And my recommendation is prepare for it in whatever way you can. If that means, starting to use the technology, even if it's just Google Cardboard, which I've been recommending for a long time, or, whatever it ends up being, like, understand that this is going to be a part of the makeup, part of the fabric of civilization. Okay. Now, the second part to the story that I think is interesting, and it can segue nicely into our next bit of foreplay, is that Microsoft's not involved with this. Now, why is that? In my personal analysis, I think it's because, and I think it's also a bigger part of the reason why this actual group, this association was created, is because, like I said, Microsoft is really the company that is actually providing all of the tools for everybody to be able to build and be a part, especially, be a part of this future, especially when you consider that, they have like those really, really cheap headsets. Inexpensive. I shouldn't say cheap. Inexpensive headsets coming out, and they're working with other companies that aren't on this list, interestingly, like Asus, Lenovo, and others that, these headsets that will work with Windows 10 holographic. Okay, which holographic, of course, is just the virtual reality version of the Windows 10 operating system. Okay, or, the mixed reality version of it. So Microsoft I think they have a vision for what this looks like, for what this mixed reality future looks like. And they are providing the tools for everybody to be able to help create it, which is how you get to something like that. And in so doing, there's the potential that they could corner the market on this. That they could be way, and in many ways, like with HoloLens and all that, they already are way ahead of the game. Okay. And they could really corner the market on it. And I think all of these companies, and this is very interesting, all these companies see that, oh shit, we got to do something about Microsoft again. It's 2001 all over again, right? Where, Microsoft could potentially in the near future, because of mixed reality, could become, the big green giant again. In that space, maybe not in, necessarily, well, I guess it'd be in the operating space, maybe not in some other aspects, maybe not in mobile, even though that could certainly change with our next story here. I think that this is very much a response to what Silicon Valley sees Microsoft doing and just how well they're achieving it and how well they're pulling it off. And also the market response and the, consumer response to what Microsoft has been putting out there recently. So that's kind of my take on what's going on with the Google or not the Google, that's the number one company there, but the Global VR Association. Like that's kind of its purpose. Now, let's get into another story here. And this is something that certainly a lot of people have kind of seen or predicted would eventually come. I don't think anybody was really sure what shape that would take, how exactly this would work. But Microsoft really did, and I mean this, they dropped a bombshell. Right now there's the WinHack event, which is somewhat of a developer conference. It's happening in Shenzhen, China right now. And it was just on the 7th, just this past Wednesday in December 2016. They announced what they're calling the cellular PC. Now, what did they announce? Well, they announced that, guess what? Windows 10, the full desktop version, not Windows 10 mobile, nothing like that, but the full desktop version of Windows 10 can work on ARM processors now. Woo! If me saying that, if you don't see the potential right out of the gate, this means all those extra, all those Win32, programs, all that software, Audacity, which I'm using right now, go down the list of all the software, say that you've been using for over a decade, maybe 2 decades or something. All of that could work on any device powered by an ARM processor. Now, it's a very specific ARM processor. It's going to be on there's a Snapdragon 835 that this is going to start being, able to work with, the Qualcomm. And Microsoft worked directly with Qualcomm to make this, make this a reality. But the 835 chip, if specs are to be believed, supposed to be like, 30% higher performance, 40% less battery drain, all that stuff. So, a lot of that's interesting in and of itself, but the ability to, I kind of want to lay out a theory first, but whatever, the ability to run any piece of Windows software on an ARM processor is, that is so huge. That's some of the biggest news you could ever get. And why is this big news? Because this means, and again, they're calling them cellular PCs. All right. Now, Microsoft is just saying, yeah, we're going to have tablets. We're going to have, some convertibles. We're going to have all these things that are going to run it. They never mention the phone, but I think this is what everybody instantly thought of. Wait a second. We have these powerful fucking ass phones. Okay. Relatively powerful, in comparison to, well, depends on what context you put them in, but powerful enough. You have these powerful phones. And now, especially when you have like continuum technology that's been tested on Windows 10 Mobile, where you just plug your phone into a dock, that dock is connected to either wired or wirelessly to, monitors, keyboard, mouse, your entire desktop setup. And then suddenly your Windows phone could effectively turn into a desktop. Well, now, it's not a matter of Windows 10 Mobile, and it's not a matter of, okay, do we have UWP? Do we have universal apps installed on this? Do we have a universal app for that and all that stuff? Even though Microsoft was a Project Centennial, has made it very easy to convert any Win32 program, into a universal app, certainly. But now, there's no need to even do that, because now you're getting, you could put this on a phone, because most phones run off of ARM processors, right? On a phone, you could run Windows 10 desktop and all the software there too. And then you have, Windows 10 is designed to work with, whatever screen it happens to be on, and it can convert to that. So if you have a particularly larger phone, you could end up, just put Windows 10 into tablet mode. Or, if it has all the connectors and everything's right, or you have a dock or whatever, you do the whole kind of the continuum thing where you plug in your phone to the monitor, keyboard, mouse, some kind of hub, and then suddenly, whoa, it turns into, on the screen, it turns into a desktop. Windows 10 can do this automatically. It's not like, because, something I've messed with, and that I've also seen, other people mess with, is like on the Intel mobile processors. Okay. The Intel SoC processors and all that, the Atoms, you could install, if you had the Zenfone 2 or the Zenfone Zoom or some phone that was using Intel processors instead of ARM, you could install Windows 7. Now, the challenge there is that you're using this entire desktop operating system on an incredibly small screen. Not to say that I haven't done that before. I mean, like the first netbooks from Asus, what was it, a 7-inch screen? I mean, that's tablet size, right? The netbooks. And I used Windows just fine and dandy on that. But let's be clear here, we're talking like 5.5 inch and under usually, maybe a little over, that you would be running Windows 7 on. And that's problematic. Windows 10, that's not problematic because it is designed to handle all these different screen sizes and all of these different interfaces. It's also not touch first, but touch equal. It can equally work well with touch as it can with a mouse and keyboard. So this is a huge fucking deal. You really are finally going to have a PC in your pocket. You could. Now, again, they didn't talk about phones at all. But that's what's going down. Like, there's always all the rumors about the Surface phone from Microsoft, right? That's what this is going to end up being. I mean, and it's kind of a question. I didn't get a clear answer on how long this is being worked on, but a part of me wonders if the real reason we were just talking about the Intel, like the Atom processors for mobile phones, which I loved. I still think it was a brilliant idea. And I thought they were very powerful, just nobody took to them, just no matter what Intel did. And I thought people would take to it because Intel was in many ways saying, here, no, you can have these processors for free. Just put them in your phones. But it didn't shape out that way. But what I think is interesting is that, maybe Intel knew that Qualcomm and Microsoft were working together so tightly to eventually create this ability that maybe Intel's like, well, look, if we're not going to have Microsoft on with this, and certainly a lot of companies, with Android aren't getting into it, let's just call it a day. Let's throw in the towel. So maybe that's what happened there, because otherwise it's really hard to believe that Intel wouldn't play the long game in the mobile space. I mean, not that they dropped out of it entirely, but that they would have been a lot more serious. I mean, they've got to have the money, the expendable, cash to be able to handle really a few years worth of, people not buying into a certain, processor technology or something. So that suddenly makes a lot of sense. Now, how is this working? How is this happening? Because really, there's no reason that Win32, all this software designed to function on x86 processors or x64, whatever, you know what I mean? How could this suddenly work on ARM processors? Well, what's really, it's an emulation layer effectively. I mean, that's exactly what's going on. And it's very similar to when, if you remember when, this was the time that I started to stop being a Apple fanboy, was when Apple dropped the PowerPC, architecture, when they stopped coming, when after the G5, right? Well, when did they do that? Did they stop it at the G4? Anyway, when they stopped developing a PowerPC and they went to Intel processors, it was the same thing, to where all of that software, all that Mac software that you had been using for a decade, they just ran an emulation layer so that it could function, on the new Intel processor based, Macs. And same deal here. And that's fine. And who knows what the future will look like? Is it going to be this? And it's kind of funny too, right? Because didn't they call that universal apps or universal software? Didn't Apple call it that when it could work on PowerPC and on Intel processors? I hadn't thought about that. Anyway, regardless, I don't want to get lost down don't want to get lost in those weeds. But yeah, I mean, so this could work. I mean, it ended up turning out just fine for Apple, really, in the end, even though I love the PowerPC architecture and I really miss it. And I think Apple took quite a few steps back. And in some ways, ARM processors really aren't there in comparison, to what AMD and Intel put out in the desktop space. So it's kind of it's a few steps back as far as that goes as well. But I get it. This is going to allow for, a lot of adoption. And it's going to, allow for a lot of new apps. I mean, this is, that's the other part too, is like, look, the App Store problem's fucking solved. I mean, really, because most apps have a web portal of some kind. And if you could turn whatever's in your pocket into a desktop, you can go through that. Or also, now you have Windows mobile devices, whatever that ends up looking like, these cellular PCs, as Microsoft is calling them, have the single largest software library in the world. That's just a fact. Doesn't matter what's in the App Store. Doesn't matter what's in the Play Store. You have access to the entire X32 library, or Win32 library. Holy fucking shit. This is big. I mean, really, like, when a phone comes out that can do this, or who knows what else. I'm still kind of hopeful for the watch, though maybe not too hopeful. We're going to get into that for our lead story. This is how a dark horse rides in and takes over a category. I'm not saying that that's definitely going to happen. I'm just saying that, like, this is the best shot of some kind of, third company moving into the mobile space and dominating. So anyway, let's move on to the next bit. Why don't we talk a little more Microsoft, and then actually we can talk a little more mobile phones, because a couple interesting things have happened out of that space. So there is a new chatbot out there. Of course, if everybody remembers, there was Microsoft Tay, which we talked about. And this is ironic. I almost saved this story for next week because it was, so I'll tell you why I saved the story. So, because there's a new chatbot. It's called Microsoft Zo. I don't think they're calling it Zoe. I think they're just calling it Zo. And like when we talked about Tay, the episode I talked about Tay was the same episode where the second half of the episode of Sovryn Tech was an hour-long review of Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, what's interesting is that next week is when Star Wars Rogue One comes out, or, a Rogue One, or Rogue One, a Star Wars story. That's the official title, right? Which I already have my tickets for. I ordered them a week ago, and I will be there December 15th. I'm catching it a day early. But what's interesting is that, like, next week I could have been talking about Microsoft Zo and then because I'm going to do an hour-long review also of Rogue One on next week's Sovryn Tech. So it's just kind of funny that, like, last year, like, almost to the day, I was talking about Microsoft's last chatbot, that being Microsoft Tay, and now a year later, we're talking about the new chatbot. So I could have saved it, but it's not that important, because honestly, this really isn't that impressive. First off, Microsoft Zo is definitely targeted, as to where Tay was targeted at everybody, as far as, like, who can interact and use this. Zo is targeted definitely more at youth, and it is only in Kik right now, the Kik Messenger, K-I-K. And I've seen some demos of it. It just doesn't really impress me, and it's definitely, like, its abilities, or what it's willing to, let's just say, what aspects of humanity and conversation it's willing to explore is significantly limited. Like, I mean, there's no way, Nazis or, racism or anything like that is going to come up, which is exactly what happened with Microsoft Tay. And of course, like we talked about with Microsoft Tay a year ago now, my main point is that, look, there's nothing wrong necessarily with these technologies. It's just that humanity's not ready for any of it. I mean, and it's still true. I mean, a year later, humanity's not any more ready for really the internet itself than it was a year ago. Not a whole lot has changed in that year. And that's a pity. But I mean, Microsoft has certainly learned, and they're like, well, we're not going to let this thing do anything, that being Microsoft Zo. And it's interesting that they chose that this is only going to be available on Kik, because Kik, while popular, is not really popular. It's not Twitter. It's not Facebook. It's not even, I don't even think it has the same install base as, like, say, Line Messenger, which is one of my favorites, or WeChat or anything like that. So they might have been trying to do sort of a quasi-local idea where they're testing it out in a much smaller platform to see what happens. I don't know that a bunch of people went and installed Kik just to be able to use this thing. I certainly did not. I went ahead and just said, okay, yeah, let's go look up some demos and see how it works. But it's interesting that Microsoft really hasn't quit on this. They're just trying to make these more, AI chatbots, blah, I mean, there's, depending, a lot of those terms can be loaded, but that's the idea. And obviously, like, what is the point of creating a lot of these things? Well, it is to, I think in the end, it's to improve Cortana. And this is probably the case, I do think this is definitely the case with Microsoft Zo. So there is another chatbot out there, but don't think you're going to end up with this just endless stream of stories that Tay provided, because of all the crap that, people effectively got her to say, or got it to say, right? But yeah, just an update, folks. And I know this doesn't shock you, but in my opinion, in the Golden Stallion's opinion, humanity is no more ready for the internet, interconnectivity, and and the bulk of the technologies we have than they were a year ago. There you go. Let's see. Let's move on to, speaking of ARM processors, or speaking of mobile anyway, the Galaxy Note 7. Now, there really is something to say here, in my opinion, because the Galaxy Note 7 has obviously been a very rocky ride. And it is now to the point, if you didn't know, it is to the point where, no, if you have a Galaxy Note 7, Samsung wants you, is telling you, you need to return this right now. And they've already done over-the-air updates. They've done OTAs where it'll make it only charge to 60%. And they've done a couple other tricks, where it will say, it'll come up with a message every time saying you need to return this phone, blah, 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 blah. Now they're putting out an OTA that said that just, if it's just shy of bricking the phone. I mean, it won't allow, it won't allow the damn thing to charge really at all. So, the Galaxy Note 7 is effectively over. Now, what's interesting is I think already it's like 93%. So there's about 1 million or so Galaxy Note 7s that ended up in the wild. And I think it's around 100,000 that have yet to have been, spoken for, that have yet to be returned. And so, yeah, so it's around those numbers. So I'm aware that it's 93% of Galaxy Note 7s have been returned. That's impressive. Of course, with OTA, with over-the-air updates, obviously, that can happen when people can only charge their phone to 60%. Well, there you go. Now, there are a lot of people, in fact, there's a chance it'll never be 100% because, if you look at the modding community, okay, for Android, which of course is still pretty substantial, thankfully, and was the main draw for Android for a lot of people. There are a lot of people trying to work out how can we keep these OTAs from getting received? How can we trick them? There's people that want to keep on using the Galaxy Note 7, which is unbelievable. They're never going to allow the damn things onto an airplane anymore, right? I'm just shocked that this is happening. Now, to be sympathetic, you have to return it, and then over a period of time, you will get a refund, and then you can go and get another phone. But there is a period of time where, for a lot of people, they'd be phoneless. If they don't really, some people, they really do this. They save up, they save their pennies to be able to have bought a Galaxy Note 7, and those people could be screwed. Like, the money's, and I understand, money's so tight that they can't just go out and get another phone to wait for Samsung, to hold up their end of the bargain. So that's kind of problematic. So I can understand, not even just from somebody wants to hold on to their Note 7 for whatever reason, maybe they think it's a collector's item, or, they're trying to mod it or something. I can see why people would want to keep it, because in some ways they don't really have a choice. Now, so you can kind of, with some degree of modding, you could stop the OTAs from being received, and, you could keep on using your Note 7. You could get the 100% charge and all this. There is a next level, I think, that they could go. What they could do is they could start actually blocking the IEMI numbers. And, that renders the phone useless. If you start blocking IEMI numbers, you can't connect to a cell tower. You can't connect to much of anything. and then it becomes a glorified Walkman at that point, which maybe you want that. Okay. But if you receive the update about the IEMI, then, and the IEMI is that number that's under the battery that when you call your mobile provider, it's like, oh, could you give us the IEMI number? It's that thing. It's kind of the phone's identifier, even more so than an IP address. And, you've already received the ability to not charge your phone if you receive the IEMI update. So, I guess I applaud to some degree people holding on to these things, and just kind of fucking with Samsung. But wow, and really for me, there is actually a part of this that's very concerning. Is understand that you are seeing in real time what any company or perhaps government or corporatist action, where it's that unholy alliance between the two, where they could forward the ability to just, make your phone useless, like just through over an OTA. Very, very concerning. And they could do it for any reason that they want, right? Now, I know there's technologies that, can kind of shut down, say, like an iPhone, like the police can shut down an iPhone within a certain area. Like a lot of that stuff's been built in to phones. And I'm sure, the kill switch and all this different stuff that, that had been mandated by like the California Senate. And now it's pretty much becoming like a federal thing in the United States. So point being is that don't rely, especially if you're an activist, or whatever, don't rely on your smartphone so much. Don't rely on your mobile devices so much. Okay. There's something to be said for having that good old fashioned laptop or desktop or whatever, where you have a lot more control. Like if you have something I've had in the show notes for Sovryn Tech for years, is it's right in the appendix. It's always been there. It will always be there as long as it's available. And that is the Libreboot X200, or they have the Libreboot X, is the X400? Are they calling it? Or is it the T400 that they want to call it? It's based off of the T400 ThinkPad from Lenovo from, was it 2009, 2010? But the Libreboot machines that you can get through the link, those are like everything's open source. You're pretty much guaranteed you have total control over this machine. And yeah, it's an older computer, but that's the price of this, because now there's so much shit built into these things where you lose control. So if you're really paranoid, and I say that with love, I don't say that as a pejorative. You do not want to be relying on your mobile phone. You don't want to be relying on really any even, computer that has really come out today. Even Librem, which we didn't get into that subject with Paige. Well, next time she's on. But the Libreboot is really the only way I think you have more of a guarantee, as close to a certainty as you can. But I mean, that's, and for me, that's the real story here, is that, with just an OTA, my phone can become useless, right? Certain functions could just, or even it's that certain functions just stop working, that like, you can lose that kind of control. That should be concerning to people. Now, interestingly, Verizon is actually not wanting to, and this is shocking because, Big Red is as bad a company as they come as far as, caring about consumers. Verizon is actually saying, we don't want to put out that OTA. Like they don't want to make these Note 7s useless. And probably because they would have to end up dealing with the backlash, because especially if they went the IMI route, people are going to be saying, hey, Verizon, what the fuck? I can't call people. And admittedly, that at least that's what Verizon is saying that they're worried about, is that if people are without a phone at any given moment, or if they do this non-charging thing that, put out the OTA that Samsung developed that makes it so you can't charge the phone, that people won't be able to, make emergency phone calls, contact family, whatever is necessary. And I'll give Verizon, if that's really what's going on there, if that's really their thought process, I'll give them a little bit of credit. Thank you for, recognizing that, hey, there's people that could be, what's the saying? Up the creek without a paddle or something like that, right? It could be bad. So, but again, the real story is that you don't control that thing, and you can go to, I have a website, darkandroid.info. You can read all the content there and try to set up a mobile device that would not fall prey to this sort of thing. But you'll see just kind of how extreme you have to go to really be able to even come close to achieving that sort of, that sort of freedom, quote unquote, with your own devices. So anyway, let's move on to another story here. And I'll just do these quickly since we're so deep in already. First off is, well, while we're on the subject of mobile phones, you have, I think this is kind of hilarious. So of course you have Jackgate, right? Which is, the reference to the fact that on the iPhone 7, they got rid of the headphone jack. Now, of course, we already reviewed this. We talked about this, months ago. And yes, I think it's crazy, especially since in the new MacBooks, they still left the headphone jack in. I mean, their arguments, Apple's arguments generally do fall flat. Look, folks, as great a products as they make, and they do, I will give them credit where it is due. And, OS 10 and, I mean, I don't mean to sound so harsh on the company. I mean, well, I do in some ways, but in other ways I don't. I'm not insulting people necessarily for using, Apple products. All right. But I think what's really funny here is that kind of the evolution of the headphone jack was supposed to be these AirPods, right? Which were these, wireless, they're Bluetooth connected, little, earphones that you wear, and, no wires. That's why there isn't a headphone jack, right? And the idea is well, I mean, the funny thing was that people said, you're going to lose these instantly. Everybody, and they're $150 or somewhere around there. And people are going to lose them, just nonstop, because how are these things even going to sit in your ear? And I agree with that, because all the headphones I wear, I like earphones, but I got to have a little clip on them, that allow them to really stick to me, because, well, I'm just that active and intensive a guy, I guess. But, woo, when is he wearing those headphones? But the AirPod, this was supposed to be, your solution for not having a headphone jack in the iPhone 7. They're still not available, and they've been delayed. And I mean, and you have to believe that Apple wanted these things available for Christmas, right? This is going to be one of the ultimate Christmas presents. Nobody's getting these things for Christmas. I mean, unless it comes out, and then it's late, because, if you're waiting until the last week of December, the second to last week of December to put something to market, your Christmas sales are still going to hurt. But what's happening is the reason that it's being delayed apparently is because now, some people do have them and they seem to work very well. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on with it. There's people that demo them, and you can see it on other tech shows. Apparently the hard part is getting, since it's two separate devices, again, these two AirPods, they're not connected in any way. All right. So these two, you have two separate devices, and so you're sending out effectively kind of two Bluetooth signals to make this work. And that's where the confusion comes in, is that apparently the iPhone 7 will communicate with one of the AirPods in your ear, but it won't communicate well with the other one at the same time. And you run into an issue with that. Now, there are companies that have already achieved this sort of thing. And understand, you say, well, what's the problem here? Bluetooth headphones have existed forever. Yeah, sure. But they're generally connected somehow, either by a wire or a band or something like that, which of course has a wire in it, to where, it's not trying to communicate with two devices at once. So I sort of understand the technical challenge. I'm not exactly sure what these other companies that have achieved this, that have these all available already, what they've done. My guess is this comes down to, and that's why I think this is important to talk about, is that really getting rid of the headphone jack, having the AirPods that are quote unquote so advanced, that there is a purpose. There is a grander purpose besides putting audio in your ear for AirPods. There's something, they have some kind of other idea. It probably has to do with health, or something along those lines. There's a reason why something, you're wearing in your ear has a data stream going back and forth, not just being transmitted to, but also, going back. So I appreciate the technical challenge that it is. I am not knocking Apple for not being able to figure this out. I do think it's kind of funny, but I get it. But let's be clear here that I think this highlights just how much these AirPods are supposed to do in the future, because this can't just be about audio, because otherwise, because that's probably what happened is that these other companies figured it out because they're just trying to figure out how to send audio to your fucking ear. It's where Apple seems to want to do a whole lot more. What that is, speculation. But I definitely believe it has something to do with HealthKit and maybe a whole lot more. Maybe in the future, it'll be like, what is it? The Xperia ear from Sony, where you can control and you interact with everything right through the ear. Like maybe this is to somehow get Siri into an AirPod and allow the AirPods to interact via Bluetooth with, something nearby, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot in this that, I think this whole story just, again, lends credence to the fact that this is going to be, this AirPod thing is a direction that Apple's really looking to do a whole lot more than feed you audio. So anyway, enough of that. I want to get into the main story here. Did I cover everything I wanted to? Oh, I did. I had one more. I'm sorry. All right. We're going to do this one real quick. There was, just because, and this is just going to be me saying I told you so, because I get to say that a lot. Sorry. I don't mean that to sound like an ass. I'm just saying that, like, I call a lot of this shit, and frankly, I wouldn't mind a little applause for saying, yeah, I knew this. And of course, the big one that I keep hitting on, and if you're annoyed by it, you can let me know. But I'm going to say it, the Amazon World Domination Tour. I have been saying since like episode 60 something that you don't understand. Amazon is the real tech giant. They are the Microsoft of their day, and they probably will be for a very long time, because they have this very unique relationship with not just the internet and the digital realm, but the physical realm. And they are way ahead of the game than any other company out there, even though I think Uber is setting themselves up to be a competitor to Amazon. That's who they're really looking to take on. But regardless, it was announced, and it was kind of a teaser more than anything of what's called Amazon Go, I think is the name of it. And it's a store. It's a store. There's a video you can watch. And what this video shows off, and it's not a long video, but people walk into a store and they look like they're stealing things. Like they look like they're just taking stuff off of the shelf, and then they just walk out of the store. They don't go through any kind of cash out line, nothing of the sort. And what this is they're highlighting the idea that, when you're attached, say, to your Amazon account and all this, and as you grab things off the shelf, that you're automatically getting charged kind of as you go and as you walk out the door. Now, the main thing to bring up here, okay, there's 2 points. One is that this is not a new idea. Okay, I remember a video from like almost 20 years ago where Intel had this very same idea. And this probably, was the idea that they were going to build like some kind of, I don't know if I'd say processor, but they're going to build some kind of chip effectively that, would register everything you pick up. And then you would have perhaps a computer in your pocket, and that would register, what you're buying, and that would have all your payment information, kind of like what we have now with Android Pay or, Apple Pay and all that. So not a new idea. Amazon did not innovate here in any way, shape, or form, as to where Amazon has innovated at certain points. Certainly, I'll give them that. But they're actually going to build these. They're going to build at least one, and then they'll kind of go out from there. But which leads us to the second point, which is what I've said, is that if you think Amazon, and of course this started with the Amazon bookstores, but if you think Amazon can't move into the physical retail and that they won't, you're crazy. I said they absolutely would, and I said that long before an Amazon bookstore ever opened up. And I said, you're going to get groceries, you're going to get all this shit, especially because now this makes a little more sense, right? Is I said, it was like, why are they built? Everybody was wondering, why is Amazon making a store that just shows off fire tablets effectively in the middle of Manhattan, right? Or, in the middle of New York City? Why? People were kind of baffled. Didn't make sense. I mean, what is this, just, prime real estate to advertise these products that frankly are really geared not at the high end market, but at the low end market? It didn't even make sense. And I said on Sovryn Tech years ago, or when that was first announced, I said, this is because, as I said, they're going to get into groceries. They're going to get into, they're going to start putting all of this shit, and they have their own line of like products. I mean, you can get, what is it, Amazon Basics, right? And they even have like a clothing line now too, all of which has come out over in the, in the past couple of years. All of these things, they can just start putting it right into their Amazon Go stores. And yes, that spot, in New York City, that prime spot I guarantee you is going to turn into an Amazon Go store. And that's what it was all about. Getting people used to Amazon's presence. And then they're going to have their little retail dream come to life. This is, Yeah, there's Apple stores. Yeah, there's Microsoft stores. Yeah, Google likes doing or has always wanted to do stores and all this blah, 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 blah. Okay. But all of those are just showing off, a very limited line, a very niche, set of products, as to where Amazon is the company that is the online giant. Okay. And they can offer literally everything in their stores. And a lot of it could be built effectively in-house, can be sent from in-house. Incredible. I mean, I have a problem with it. And it's interesting, we talk about President Trump. Trump said he's going to go after Amazon for monopoly practices. Well, here's a little more fuel for his fire. Now, again, I've said Amazon's not a monopoly. Okay. And he says he's going after him for antitrust. And that term can mean a few different things. Okay. But his exact words were, that it's a monopoly. Now, it's not a monopoly, and Trump is an idiot. It's a monopsony. Okay. Which is the opposite, where you control, you have one company that handles all distribution, not one company that handles all production. Okay. Which is a monopoly, something, right? So Amazon is a monopsony, and this is just more of that. That's really all that's going on here. So it's interesting. It's not new. It's not innovative. This has been thought of for a long time. There have been demos done for a long time that had nothing to do with Amazon, but they're the ones that are going to make it a reality. And I think I would venture that in certain areas, certain cities and all this, that this is going to be a wild success. People are just going to go nuts about this, and they don't realize, I don't know exactly how all of this is working. So I don't want to get into privacy implications and other things, because until I know exactly what technology they're using, it's speculation, but I think people are just going to go nuts for it. So anyway, let's get into our main story for this week. But before I get into the main story, I do just want to take the time to thank one of our sponsors. And of course, Agorist Hosting. I'm going to pronounce it that way. Agorist Hosting, Agorist hosting.com. Agorist These are the guys. Believe me, if you want web hosting, you want to get your website up and running, or perhaps you want to get in, you want to talk about innovative shopping. Try this one on. OpenBazaar, baby. Woo! Amazon's got nothing on that. But Agorist Hosting, they do. AgoristHosting.com. They will, you want an OpenBazaar experience, you want to run a business on OpenBazaar, you go through these guys, because, they have the setup. It's far better than any way that you could do it. Certainly better than running it yourself and all that. And you have, and don't worry about it. You're like, well, but I'm handing it over to Agorist Hosting. Are they going to, respect me and, respect the fact of what I'm trying to do, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about it. Believe me, they want to help you. They are knee deep in the crypto space. Okay. They are knee deep in the activist space. They are knee deep in the idea of creating real free markets. They are all about it. And they are an overall crypto preferred business. They want your Bitcoin. They want to deal in Bitcoin. They don't want to deal in anything else. Okay, these are the people you want to be working with. They are as ethical as hell. I love these guys. Okay, and the customer service, phenomenal. Believe me, they're going to take care of you. I know these guys, and I know that they will take care of you. If you want to run a website, they are worth every dollar they ask. Okay, so I want you to go to agoristhosting.com. Okay, you can let them know. If you go with one of their plans, you can let them know the Golden Stallion sent me, and believe me, they're going to know who you're talking about. They might even send you a little woo with it in the reply email or something. But these guys are just the best. So if you want to get serious about, having a website, or if you want to get serious about maybe taking advantage again of, a really innovative market, not Amazon Go, but OpenBazaar, these are the people you want to be dealing with. They are going to take care of you. They're going to take great care of you. So go to agoristhosting.com. Let them know that the Golden Stallion sent you. All right. Okay. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into our main story here. And we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. We're going to get into HackSec in a little bit because I got a doozy there as well. But this story, so this is kind of an analysis here. Well, not kind of, it is an analysis. And there's actually, there's so many directions that this event that occurred, not event as in a conference, but this thing that occurred in the past week, there's so many directions to take this. There's so much that it says. that is much broader than, just kind of the initial thing that occurred. So let's break into it. And so here's the story. Pebble is dead. This is coming from Gizmodo, of all places, as we call Gizmodo on this show. Pebble is dead and its customers are completely screwed. Pebble, one of the best-known smartwatch brands, is dead. Rumors about the company's demise have been swirling since the information reported a potential Fitbit buyout last week. And of course, this story is just from a couple days ago in the first week of December. This rumor was going around for quite some time. I'll read on. Today, in a post on Kickstarter, Pebble confirmed that Fitbit was acquiring, quote unquote, key Pebble assets, and that Pebble would, quote, no longer be operating as an independent company, end quote. This is completely in line with the Bloomberg report last night that claimed only chunks of Pebble were being sold to Fitbit, namely its intellectual property, software engineers, and testers. Designers and other staff will be let go, and current products and all other assets are, according to Bloomberg, expected to be sold to pay the shuttering company's debt. So Pebble, real quick, was definitely running in debt, and I want to read more on this, but perhaps the company really couldn't have, just to speak on that, there's probably a really good chance that the company could not have survived outside of 2016 if this sort of thing didn't happen. So even if it wasn't Fitbit that bought them, probably someone else would have jumped on it. And, you could imagine, say, a Microsoft or, maybe even Google or somebody would want to get in on this, because Pebble did do some very interesting innovations. There's, no doubt about that. Anyway, let me read some more to the story, because again, there's so much to say on this. And that leaves Pebble's loyal customers out in the cold. While Pebble's Kickstarter note ends on a happy note of gratitude to its many loyal customers, those customers are in fact royally screwed. Quote, one-to-one Pebble support is no longer available, end quote, and, quote, any Pebble currently out in the wild is no longer covered by or eligible for warranty exchange, end quote. This means no matter when you purchased or received your Pebble device, you are on your own. And if your device dies, you're simply out of a device. Any warranty you might have been promised from Pebble directly is void. If you didn't purchase from Pebble, but from a site like Amazon, you may still be able to return the product for cash or store credit. You can also expect to see zero software support or updates going forward, despite Fitbit's acquisition. If you took part in Pebble's recent Kickstarter, which launched on May 24th and raked in nearly $12.8 million, and you have not received your product, then you are, again, screwed. As of today, Pebble will no longer be shipping devices. Pebble 2 backers who haven't received a device won't receive one. The Time 2, Core, and Time Round, originally intended to ship last month and later scheduled to ship in January 2017, are completely canceled. Pebble promises these smartwatchless backers, will receive a refund, which is great. They deserve a refund. However, those refunds will take place through the Kickstarter system and aren't expected to be completed until March of 2017, nearly a year after many backers dropped their cash on the project. Now, I'm going to step in for just 1 second and comment on that. And there's a lot to say really about crowdfunding as far as this goes. If you back something on Kickstarter with anything other than throwaway cash, I don't want to say you're a fool, but you're a fool. I don't care what it is. There's some things, like if it's a tabletop game or, some other stuff that has been in the manufacturing process in other ways for, decades, if not hundreds of years. I think you can feel a little more confident. You can feel a little bit better, but if it's something really new, just don't count on actually getting what you're getting. It's absolutely, even if it's like a digital thing, if it's a video game, that is totally a roll of the dice. So not that I'm not sympathizing or empathizing with the people that helped fund this, and I'm glad that they're getting money back. But as far as the money back not coming until March 2017, well, really just be glad you're even getting money back. And second of all, like I said, if you haven't learned by now through Kickstarter and Indiegogo and all these different platforms that, might not want to trust that whole process. If you haven't learned that by now, or that you might be throwing your money away, well, I don't know what to tell you. But this is a much bigger story. So there's a lot more to say here. reading more of the story, and that more than the loss of cool tech and the honoring of warranties is the real kick in the pants. Pebble, saying that being, the refund situation is more of a problem. Reading on. Pebble essentially bamboozled $12.8 million out of its customers and then sat on the money for the last 6 to 7 months. Worse, the company wasn't upfront about the rumors and its own reported demise, instead leaving backers twisting in the wind for the last week, surreptitiously updating the expected ship dates for products that it had good reason to know it might never be able to ship. This isn't just a major blow for the already dying smartwatch market. It's a blow for crowdfunding in general. Pebble was one of crowdfunding's most notable successes, and its continued reliance on crowdfunding for each product launch suggested that we were seeing the beginnings of a new kind of business plan where companies could be supported by their fans rather than angel investors, which stallion breaking in some ways, I think that's I really appreciate that kind of business model. In some ways, in other ways, I really like when you give a person the money when the product's done, or whatever it is finished. When you can get a finished product, then you hand over cash. But I'm not necessarily opposed to, well, hey, this could be a new type of business model that could be very interesting. Reading on, if Pebble, one of Kickstarter's biggest success stories, can fail so spectacularly, then why should a consumer put trust in any of the smaller crowdfunding campaigns out there? Just when it was looking like at least some crowdfunding could be trusted, Pebble has proven that you just can't. Invest in the crowdfunding future at your own risk, which is exactly what I just said. We reached out to Pebble for comment, and we'll update if the company responds. And Pebble had not responded, or has not responded yet to the story. So, okay. So, just a ton to unpack here. No pun intended. Yeah. I mean, what does this say about crowdfunding? It's really kind of hard to think of anything, like I said, kind of outside of the board games and maybe a couple other products to where you really get anything out of all this crowdfunding, out of the Kickstarters and all that. Now, I know some people will even say, well, yeah, but the ship rate of a lot of stuff isn't like too terrible. Like some people still get their coffee mug that does something special or whatever. But then how does it actually work the way it's advertised? A lot of times, no. So this is a very real concern. And it's also problematic because Pebble was, well, yeah, like they said, I mean, again, how to put this, putting aside, a lot of different avenues, a lot of different things, but bottom line is that they collected $12.8 million and they obviously wasted it. Like they just wasted it. They didn't know what to do with it, because the company was tanking. There were real problems. And this is, a lot of people were very excited about the products that they were going to be releasing, like the Time 2, the Core, and some of this other stuff. And the ship dates kept getting pushed back and, and you're not going to probably see any of those products ever come out. Fitbit, was probably interested more in like, okay, so how do you do this with ink and all that? And I could understand their acquisition. It's a logical one. But wow. I barely trust a crowdfund. Now, I mean, I've taken part in some crowdfunds, generally when it's a company that has a little bit more of a track record. I mean, yeah, Pebble came out with a couple watches, so I could understand why people were a little more trusting. But even then, obviously now we know, that's not enough. Like I backed Wasteland 3. I've backed a few things here and there. I backed some stuff from Crime Think. Not spending a lot of money because I don't have it, but you know what I mean? It's just, yeah, I've done that, but usually it's with something where I was like, okay, yeah, no, you guys have delivered. Like, you've been around for a while, and like a good long while, perhaps. Pebble is really a company that's only been around, maybe four years, maybe less. So yeah, buy at your own risk, or, crowdfund at your own risk. I totally agree with that. And this speaks to as well, not just, crowdfunding on Kickstarters and all that, but like the fundraising that so many of these cryptos do. We talked about last week with Zcash, and I appreciated the fact that they didn't do like any pre-sale. They didn't do a pre-sale of some dumbass coin, and it's like, well, that I applaud that because, you delivered the product and then, Zcash can have its value. So I really do hope that like this whole kind of crowdfunding idea where, you can kind of fund this stuff and everybody gets to act like an investor effectively. Like I do think that that's a viable alternative to various business models. Okay. But for me, I still feel like, this just kind of goes to show, don't give anybody money until you can hold the thing in your hand. I know not everybody can do that. I understand that. Okay. But well, consumer confidence is a thing, and it's a thing that companies need to pay attention to. And it's something that Pebble completely dropped the ball on. And I mean, this is almost, and it's interesting too. Like, I mean, a lot of this has kind of happened where also, the crowdfunders get their money back, but I'm kind of reminded of what happened with Oculus Rift. When Oculus Rift got bought out by Facebook, it's like, wait a second, every crowdfund, every Kickstarter, person that helped fund the Oculus Rift development, they're really an investor. Like they deserve some shares here in Facebook or something, like, because your company wouldn't exist if it wasn't for them to even get bought out. And this is also true for Pebble. Like, I think that's kind of shitty, quite frankly. Now, monetary stuff aside, the other aspect of this that I really want to address is the smartwatch category, which I talked about a little bit on Patreon, on this week's Patreon Q&A on Wednesday. And I said, it's like, it looks like the smartwatch category as we know it right now is dying. Like, it's just going away. The Apple Watch is not meeting expectations. I know people want to say, it's like, oh, well, people call the Apple Watch a failure, but they say the Amazon Echo is a success, and the Amazon, there's more Apple Watches sold than there are Amazon Echoes. So how does that make any sense? Well, the Amazon Echo is a success. The statement still makes sense because the Amazon Echo is a success in that it created an entire new category and enough people bought it. Okay. The Apple Watch is a failure because it really didn't create a new category. Not really. And, it's late to the game like everything Apple does. Or at least in the past decade. Okay. Whatever. You can critique that statement if you want. But it wasn't really, it wasn't innovative. And there is a certain expectation, like I said, it didn't meet expectations, that, Apple's going to sell such and so much of a certain thing and that the whole world is suddenly very envious of wanting one. But you're hard pressed to find somebody being envious of someone else's Apple Watch. Ooh, can I get that? Outside of the initial shock of like, oh, I've never seen an Apple Watch in action. Can I check that out? So I think the statement still stands that yes, the Apple Watch is a failure by its own metrics and its own category. As to where, the Amazon Echo created a category and it's selling. And so it's a success. All that aside. So you have the Apple Watch, which, I think it can be chalked up as a failure or it's not doing as expected. And then you have Android Wear, which you have companies dropping right and left as far as we're not making a new model next year. Lenovo said, we're not going to make a new Moto 360, which is probably the most popular, smartwatch out there. Well, not the most popular, but Apple Watch, I think, is probably sold more, but, it's the most popular Android Wear watch, I guess you could say. So you have that issue. You have the issue of that I also brought up on Patreon that you had Android Wear 2.0 get shown off during Google I/O this year in 2016. And that looked like a really exciting platform in a lot of ways. However, where is it? Why wasn't it at the 10.4 event when they were showing off all the other hardware? Some people are saying it's going to come out in January. Okay, well, I'll believe it when I see it. I wouldn't be shocked if Google just completely scrapped the whole notion and scrapped the idea and said, yeah, we're going to completely ignore this and we're going to move on. Especially since like Google Assistant doesn't really seem to be taking off. But largely because, Allo is not taking off. Like that messaging app has completely flopped. And I imagine that Google Assistant was kind of the cornerstone of what Android Wear 2.0 was supposed to be, because they don't want you necessarily interacting with a very small interface on a watch, even though I don't have a problem with that. They want you interfacing using your voice. So if Google Assistant hasn't taken off, that I think directly could affect, the smartwatch category for Google themselves. And it looks like a lot of other companies are also, again, we don't know 100% that Google's dropping it, but I'm just kind of guessing that that's going to happen. But there are a lot of other companies also that they're not developing new models for the year. Now you can take that in two ways, admittedly, with smartwatches, right? You could say that this is actually a good thing, because that means that, we're not in that 1 year or 2 year device cycle with watches, which watches historically as a technology, not smartwatches, but watches in the abstract, have never been. Watches are supposed to be that of all ironies, that timeless product, that lasts you forever, right? And they do, even the cheap stuff. I have calculator watches from the 80s, that still work, that are mine. And that I wear. So I mean, you could take it in a good way like that, okay, good. I'm glad you're not making a new Moto 360, because I don't want to buy a new watch every fucking year or every 2 years. These things should be lasting me a good long while. But then on the other side, it's like, well, but is that really just them not having any confidence in the product category? And it does feel a lot more like that, especially when you have what's happening with Pebble. Even though Pebble was still kind of a niche product, it wasn't a name that a lot of people were going to go towards. The money that was collected, $12.8 million, really should have delivered the products that people, funded. So, that's bullshit. Again, that's mismanagement on Pebble's part. But yeah, it does seem the smartwatch category is dying. Now, why is this happening? Okay, if this is happening, what is, why? What's the reason? And I want to get into that a little bit. Well, but I think the answer is actually just very simple. The answer is that nobody wants a companion piece to their smartphone. And that's all the smartwatch is right now. I think it can be more, and there have been attempts at it being more, but nobody wants to pay attention to this. And I also have a solution for all this too, that I'll get to in a minute here. So don't think I'm just complaining. If the smartwatch, like there was the original, we've talked about it many times on Sovryn Tech, and that it was the, what was it called? The LG Urbane 2nd Edition LTE watch. It was this ridiculously long name. And yes, all those words were in it. That watch had GPS built into it. It had the SIM card built into it, or where you could put in a SIM card. It had everything that a phone had. Just, it was a watch. Now, if that's what people were releasing, if that's what, smartwatches were going to be, then I think it's a category that could take off. Not because it would replace smartphones, but because it would be an alternative to the smartphone. It would be another version of mobile communications, which is what the smartphone is supposed to be all about. And so I think that's really it, is that nobody saw the point to, people just said, no, I can just pull, it's kind of the same reason the watch itself died, is because, well, I'm going to carry this device with me at all times, and I can just pull it out of my back pocket or whatever pocket, and I can look at the time. Or, in the case of the smartwatch, and I can just look at my notifications that way. Why the hell am I going to carry something else around with me? Why am I going to spend another $300 on something that just sends me notifications effectively? Or that, maybe is a little bit better in the gym? Right. It doesn't make sense. My excitement I was initially against the smartwatch category. And my excitement around it came totally from, the fact that it could become an alternative mobile communications platform. That's what I wanted out of it, but that's not what it ended up really being. So, I'm not shocked that these things aren't selling well, because they're pointless. And that Fitbit does well because Fitbit has a very specific purpose. And you have the battery life issues and all that, and I understand all of those. Pebble didn't have that problem, so that doesn't contribute to their failure. Pebbles, you could charge them like once a week, and that's all you needed to do, which I think is, it's totally practical. Compared to the average watch, it's ridiculous, but I think it's still a very practical, thing to expect. Fitbit is largely the same, I think. So, the demise is just, I mean, because they really like, and I'm glad, because this means that people still have some common sense, is that the way smartwatches were designed and how they were getting put off to you, was just dumb. It was totally a money grab. Like there's not, and I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with, wanting money. Of course not. I'm saying that it was a money grab in that this was a completely superfluous product that had no actual, like, really good purpose. You could say the health things, but, well, Fitbit already speaks to what people want out of that. So, and it's a pity because, like, I think and maybe Google will still come out with Android Wear 2. With their, what is it, Angelfish, whatever that device was called, which was their, going to be their prototype for Android Wear 2.0. Maybe they'll come out with their smartwatch and maybe everything will change. Maybe that smartwatch will have the ability, to completely replace your phone and not just be tethered to it. And if it does, awesome. I'm there. I am so there. You have no idea. But, if it doesn't, then yeah, I think this is a completely dead category. And, good. Just like tablets are dying too. There's a lot of evidence for that. If you want to hear more about that breakdown, I did talk about it in the recent Patreon Q&A on Sovereign Tech. I think it was Q&A episode 21. But, you have to become a patron to get access to that. But, tablets are dying. All these categories are dying. And what's really hopeful about that for me is that means that IoT can die. Okay, that means that Internet of Things is not a foregone conclusion. It is not like, oh yeah, no, this will be successful because so many companies are putting so much money into it. Nope. IoT can fail just as hard as potentially the smartwatches and as tablets are. And like I said with the tablets, don't talk to me about the iPad. The iPad is being, prepped and groomed to be a MacBook replacement. That's a laptop. That's not a tablet. So, now what's the solution here? Well, the thing is, the problem with anything like this, now this isn't going to solve the Pebble problem or, people with Pebble devices that aren't going to get any more updates. That sucks. Okay. Because now you have a device with, who knows what kind of security flaws and security exploits, in it. But, what do you do about, like, say these Android watches, say this happens across the board with other companies where they stop supporting them. Well, there's a solution. And I mentioned this briefly in, back when the foreplay was called Random Access, Asteroid OS. And this has come up again recently because now there's some, it's getting to a point where, it's in beta or like just starting to come out of beta. And Asteroid OS is a Linux-based operating system, which of course so is Android, but even though you'd barely know. But it's a Linux-based operating system that's designed for smartwatches. And I think you can put it onto a Moto 360 right now, and you can run all kinds of shit on that. It's very interesting. Like, this is good. So this is the beauty of it is, of course, of open source, is that you can, we can create these alternative operating systems that could really take over, say, devices that has been long forgotten by, whatever company, be it Lenovo or hell, even Pebble or Fitbit now directly. It's really Fitbit's decision to not continue to support the Pebble, which obviously makes sense because they have a direction they want to go in and they don't want another, they don't want a competitor in the market, like, something from Pebble would be. So Asteroid OS could solve some of this, and really the development overall of alternative operating systems to the biggies like Android or iOS, definitely speaks to this. And to have somewhat open hardware where you could, or, more open firmware, I guess you should say, to where you could even do this, to where you could even install Asteroid OS, which would be a very difficult thing, if you had an Apple Watch. And this speaks, this is the same thing that I think largely happened to, within the Android space where you had CyanogenMod, and where CyanogenMod keeps a lot of older phones very current, like the Galaxy S3. I don't know if you can run Nougat on it, but you can run Marshmallow on a Galaxy S3. Samsung didn't push out, Marshmallow, Android 6.0 to the Galaxy S3. The developers of CyanogenMod did. Now, that's a whole other story, too. CyanogenMod is in some real trouble, or Cyanogen Inc. is in some trouble, and it could it's interesting what it might have to say about CyanogenMod, but well, boy, I could do a whole episode breaking down all that. In fact, you know what? I am going to talk about this because I think it's an important subject, really to bring up. So anyway, I just want to end this off with the smartwatches. For now, you can install Asteroid OS if you have, say, an Android Wear device that has gone the way of the dodo, at least according to the company that originally made it. If you have Pebble, wow, I am sorry. I mean, it's the nature of the beast, no doubt. And I certainly I really would not have expected this to happen, but it did happen. And the smartwatch category as a whole, as I said, until it can be billed, until it is designed as a alternative to the smartphone and not an accessory, it's not going to take off. There's no reason for it to take off. So, but take heart in a lot of that, in that the market has really spoken and said, no, I'm not going to buy your bullshit. Good. Awesome. Anyway, before we'll get into HackSec here in a second, I want to take the time to thank another one of our sponsors. And of course, that sponsor is we're talking about things that just don't last, things that just don't get any support. Well, if you want to get both things that last and you want to get some great support, some great customer service, and probably something that's not going out of business. Okay. That is Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. Get your hands on some gold and silver. Talk about shit meant to last. Okay. Talk about a great way to store your wealth. Talk about a great way to play. I mean, gold and silver, all the precious metals. You want to get platinum, palladium, you want to get your coins, whatever you want to be getting. Okay. Roberts and Roberts is your hookup. They've got you covered. Okay. And this is I say it every week, that one of the best businesses in the world today. They care about you. They're going to take care of you. They'll even buy gold and silver off of you. And they care so goddamn much. And I mean this, they are a Bitcoin preferred business. That is so exciting. Imagine that. Imagine a company that recognizes real money all the way across the board. Gold, silver, Bitcoin. It's right up, the guy over there, Tim Fry, I love the man. He really, he understands. He gets it. He's one of us. He's a tech geek. He's a liberty-loving tech geek. What more do you want? Why wouldn't you want to deal with somebody like that? Of course you want to. So what I want you to do, go to gold.zog.ninja. That's gold.zog.ninja. Okay, you go to that, and that'll take you right to Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, and do your shopping, get your stuff. Shipping is fast. They are phenomenal. I love this company, and I cannot thank them enough for supporting Sovryn Tech and appreciating the message that we get out there, through this show. So thank you so much. Again, that's gold.zog.ninja. If you want to get your hands on some serious cold storage stuff that really lasts and holds value, instead of some trinket from, I don't know, Asus or something, jump on it. Go to gold.zog.ninja, deal with Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. Let them know the Golden Stallion sent you. Believe me, they're going to know who you're talking about. So anyway, all right, let's get, I'm going to touch on this with HackSec, and oh boy, what do they say in football? Calling an audible, right? I'm kind of calling an audible here, because I had something else in mind to talk about, and I'm going to change it up. We might not get to the other segments either, and maybe I'll just skip kind of right to the climax in this one. I will say quickly, if you're wondering, where are the new interstitials? Where are the new, segment intros and all that? We want more story. We want more of the Agent Sovryn story and all this, right? I am working on those, and I do plan on having them done for the new year. But I've been traveling, and again, I discussed some of the computer issues earlier, to where, this is how we're doing the show, just for the next couple of weeks. And we've had great guests, and it's been wonderful. Nobody has complained at all. I mean, they're wondering where these things are, but it's not like they're complaining, oh, wow, the show's just not the same, blah, blah, blah. If anything, I keep hearing that it just gets better and better and better. And thank you, for all of that feedback, and welcome to a lot of new listeners. So, but in the next couple of weeks, this show will be totally back to form. We'll have the full-on segments and all the good stuff, and you can enjoy it. And the next chapter of the story, I think will be kind of interesting. We'll put it that way. So if you're wondering where those are, don't worry, they're being worked on. I am not removing those from the show. Like I said, I am turning that shit up, turning it up to fucking 13. Anyway, so let's talk about this with CyanogenMod. So the company Cyanogen Inc., which was, indirectly, directly and in many ways indirectly related to and funding and supporting and, keeping alive CyanogenMod itself. Cyanogen Inc. is a separate company. They started working with like OnePlus, which that relationship ended. They've worked with, what's the other, Oppo, I think is the other company. They've worked with a lot of other hardware manufacturers to, instead of putting in Android, they are putting it in what's called Cyanogen OS, which is different from CyanogenMod. Okay. And CyanogenMod is just this totally, completely open source. Not that Cyanogen OS is really any different, in that sense, but it's this completely open source community kind of, created, curated, Android alternative. Okay. It's Android based, but it's an alternative to Google's version of Android. Now, Cyanogen Inc. and dealing with all these hardware partners and creating Cyanogen OS, their mission was, according to their own, who I don't think he's the CEO anymore. That's how much, turmoil is going on with this company. And we did talk about how, I forget how many thousands or hundred, no, it wasn't thousands. They're not that big of a company, but I think, no, it's like 130, I think. 130, I was thinking of Microsoft dropping thousands of people in Intel, but Cyanogen Inc., I think they laid off like 100 or, they got rid of 130 people. And that was a few months ago. Maybe this was earlier in the year. And now I think even Kirk McMaster, who is their, who was the CEO, I think he's gone too. And I agreed with Kirk's mission. Like he was very, very vocal saying, we're going to take Android away from Google. This is going to be serious. And the other interesting things are too, is that they did kind of a funding round recently. And remember, Microsoft put in $100 million into Cyanogen Inc. So it's strange what's going on. Now, none of what I'm about to talk about has affected CyanogenMod really seemingly in any way. It could, I suppose, but CyanogenMod just came out, with version 14.1. They've got the nightlies out. So, there's production goes on. It would seem, development goes on. But Cyanogen Inc. itself, it does seem to be in a lot of financial trouble, and they do seem to be kind of directionless, and really none, as far as I know, as far as I have seen, none of their hardware partnerships have really panned out to anything, worth writing home about, or to where like the direction that they're wanting to go, is worthwhile to continue. So what's happening here? What does this look like? Now, as long as we continue to have CyanogenMod, personally, I don't give a shit what happens to Cyanogen Inc. Okay. I support it. And I guess depending on what's really going on, I still support what Cyanogen Inc. was trying to do. Like, I like the idea. Yes. Google was taking over Android just way too fucking much. They always kind of have been, but lately it's just gotten even worse. And kind of the open source nature that a lot of people really loved Android for was no longer part of the program. It's still technically open source and you still have AOSP, but a lot of the more interesting features that, consumers might want to get involved with were becoming very proprietary in a lot of ways, even though, yeah, Google had open sourced Chrome by another 20%. And so now it's 95% open source and all this. Yeah, I get it. I know the arguments. But I wanted that other operating system out there, and Cyanogen, Cyanogen OS or CyanogenMod, and the differences between the two are somewhat minimal. It's mainly in design as to where CyanogenMod is more of a pure product, but otherwise they're effectively the same. I thought it was a real competitor because you could put G apps on it. You could put the Google Play Store if you needed to, or you could work completely without it. And in fact, they were starting to pre-install with some of their hardware partners. They were starting to pre-install Microsoft apps, which was interesting because, as I've said in the past, you could replace pretty much anything Google offers you on an Android phone, like Google Docs, even Google Play Music, or, just go down the list. Really, Microsoft could completely replace with some app or other, even Google Assistant, or like Google, what used to be Google now. Just put Cortana on there. Google search, put on Bing. And don't laugh about Bing. If you haven't used it lately, give it a shot one time. I mean, you might be surprised. Well, I'm not going to get into that, and I'm not going to, I don't want to sound like some kind of fanboy for Microsoft, because I'm not. But that was the interesting thing that was going on here. And one of the theories is that actually Microsoft was going to, that Cyanogen OS was going to be plan B for Microsoft, that if its mobile ambitions didn't take off, that they would invest in heavily, into creating an alternative version of Android, and that alternative version would be Cyanogen OS. Now, with news that we talked about earlier today, where you have the cellular PCs, where Windows 10 desktop, not mobile, desktop could work on ARM processors. I have a hard time believing, maybe Android is still plan B, but I wonder, kind of what I wonder is if this was in the works. And again, we don't know how long this had been in the works. We really don't know how long they'd been working with Qualcomm, that Microsoft had been working with Qualcomm, but maybe they finally, they licked it, they cracked it. And then they said, okay, we don't have to worry about Android necessarily anymore. We're still going to develop our Android apps that we have, but we're not going to push an independent presence in Android anymore. And maybe they stopped helping out with Cyanogen Inc. Maybe that was the big push. Maybe that's why, and I would feel this way too. If I was, say, the CEO of Cyanogen Inc., and if I had Microsoft on my back, if I had Microsoft saying, hey, we'll work with you, we'll pre-install, we'll do all this, we got you covered. Yeah, I'd make some pretty big boasts against Google too. I'd be saying, oh, we're going to take Android away from you, baby, and we know we can. That's not just that. Those shouldn't just be words that come out of some upstart, little company. But those are words that I would confidently say if I knew that one of my partners was one of the biggest companies, in the tech world, that being Microsoft. So, I'm laying out a lot of speculation here, a lot of guessing, because we don't know the entire reality around it. My only concern here, it sucks, yes, that we're not, Cyanogen OS, Cyanogen Inc. is probably not really going to make a dent in the smartphone space. Does that shock anybody? No, probably, maybe not. Maybe that doesn't surprise you. But it's still a pity. My major concern here is that, somehow this is going to affect the speed of development with CyanogenMod. One of the things that makes CyanogenMod so viable is that its development pace is very quick. Like, a lot of times you can get the newest version of Android, say Android 6.0 or 7.0, faster on your device if you're running CyanogenMod than if you're running the stock Android that came with your mobile phone. And so, it's just a great security thing. And you'd get all those security updates from AOSP. You'd get all this different stuff, if you were using CyanogenMod. And if that slows down, that somewhat lessens the viability of suggesting, CyanogenMod. Because if CyanogenMod if the development cycle ends up being a couple versions back or even a version back of Android, then, it's hard for me to recommend saying, oh yeah, it's better because it's open source. I know. But for the average person, which is for a lot of people who they're actually trying to reach is the average person, it becomes harder to recommend to say, yeah, use CyanogenMod when you're not going to get all the latest security updates, which used to be the argument for why you want to get, a Nexus phone, which doesn't exist anymore either. So, the smartphone space is really changing. And actually, I think the cellular PC issue that we were, with Microsoft, able to run Win32 software on ARM, a lot of this stuff, I really think that there are some serious tectonic shifts going on as far as smartphones go. And even, we talked about the tablet space briefly. We talked about smartwatches and all this. The mobile space is going to look very different than I think what people were predicting a year ago, myself included. And then, of course, you also had the issue, we even mentioned the Galaxy Note 7, where Samsung, really took a beating for that. And there's still, and not just for phones. What happened with their washing machines, the refrigerators, problem after problem after problem. So this is, and they've been working on their own operating system too, right? They have Tizen, that being Samsung. That's Android compatible, just like CyanogenMod or Cyanogen OS. So yeah, I feel a little concerned for, again, for a few reasons. One is that CyanogenMod might not have so much support. And I know that a lot of the builds on CyanogenMod are done by just community people, just by like your everyday Joe, who's a great coder, or Jane. and, and that it's not done by the actual company. But for a little, for a few years now, like they've been part and parcel. Cyanogen Inc. was really helping kind of, at least on the back end, with CyanogenMod's development. So I'm a little worried about that, but this is a space that's going to require a lot of analysis going into this next year. What is the future of mobile phones? What is the future of any of these other, mobile subcategories? Where is that all going, to end up going? I mean, it really speaks to what I talked about in episode 200, where, look, everything you thought that you knew, and it's still important to pay attention to history, I'm not saying that, but everything you thought you knew about all these different tech companies has completely changed, just in the past 3 years. Microsoft is not what they once, they're not the big bad evil. They're not the guys that, kind of ram their way into every situation. They're not, this is not 90s Microsoft. And I don't just mean that as far as in market share. I mean, as far as they're not they don't even have the same attitude anymore. Apple is definitely not the same fucking company ever since their logistics specialist, became the CEO instead of the guy that, understood people and art and things like this. Google is definitely not, I mean, they even changed their mantra. It's not, don't be evil anymore. Right. Amazon is not a different company, but now they're starting to show their colors. Yahoo doesn't exist anymore. Who would have ever thought that? Not a few years ago, I wouldn't have, especially when they brought on Marissa Mayer. It's a very, we'll always on Sovryn Tech, we'll always keep in mind, obviously, what has come before, what they've talked about in the past. But I think it's a fool's errand to hold on to, say old prejudices for tech companies, that you've had for say 10, 15 years. When these companies are just, they're completely alien to what they were. They've really changed. And just because, the tech world has changed. And so these companies had to change with it, of course. And I really, I think that's something definitely to keep in mind. So, and this just proves it. Like I said, this just completely proves it, is that really a lot of analysis, a lot of, predictions that people had, just a few years ago, are really some of them are going out the door. I don't want to say any of mine are, but well, don't mind me. But so anyway, yes, some of mine are, of course, take it easy. I'm not an ass. I'm not that crass, I should say. Nor that boastful, but I want to get into, I'm going to do a little bit of tech history here, and then maybe we'll get into some serious history at the end. But before I do, want to just take another moment for one of our sponsors, and that is CryptoCompare.com. Woo! I know some of you, and this helps a lot. When you tweet at Sovryn Tech sponsors, that's one of the direct ways you can let them know that you heard about it and that Sovryn Tech is reaching out to you and all this. Okay. So that's a great thing to do. You definitely want to, you want to try and, if you can do that, awesome. Let them know that you heard about it from me in some form or fashion. But I had heard from, actually, a guy that runs one of my other, a podcast that I really enjoy, that being the Lava Flow podcast. He had tweeted out, he said, man, thank you so much for telling me about CryptoCompare.com. There's just another tab that I'm going to keep open at all times. Because that's exactly what I do. I leave it open at all times. If I want to check on the price of Zcash, Bitcoin, Monero, I don't know, whatever I want to keep an eye on, I go there instantly. It's such a great resource. They do lots of, they do coverages on, what are the most popular wallets, coverage, not coverages. It's a very, very social website. There's so much. If you're in the crypto space, this is one of the premier websites, in my personal opinion, for the crypto space, and that is CryptoCompare.com. And I cannot thank them enough for, like all the sponsors, for sponsoring Sovryn Tech and appreciating the very unique and, according to a lot of you people, the very interesting message that Sovryn Tech delivers. So thank you so much for that. And, again, CryptoCompare.com. And if you want to let them know that you heard about it on Sovryn Tech, let them know whatever way you can. So, all right. Let's do a little, this has been a new segment that I've been planning on. Again, all the music and the segment intros, you'll start hearing some of that in the next couple weeks. So, don't worry. But Tech History is a new segment that I've devised from episode 200 up. And I haven't been able to get to it every week so far because various stories and all that and news that we need to get out or having great guests on. But I want to start it off. My initial tech history that I wanted to do was about the Commodore 64. I'm going to change that up. Some of you might have already heard this story, but I know I have a ton of new listeners. And so for tech history, this is technically the first tech history that I've been able to get to. I want to talk about my tech history, how I got into this stuff. And I won't spend a ton of time on this, but what got me into computers at first? Okay. And the answer really is a very simple one, but then we can break down sort of how it all happened. You could argue, I suppose, that, video games was the reason that I got into computers. Because that was like the first thing I ever really did on computers was play video games. If it was playing Snakes or the Oregon Trail on an Apple IIe, if it was, playing that Mount Everest game on I forget the name of it, but that was on, that was on the 8-bit Atari computers. If it was that dungeon game that I was, playing on, on that classic Tandy, whoo, I love that machine. Or even, playing games on the Commodore 64. Okay. Some of the greatest games ever made, actually. Whatever it was, whatever machine I was initially touching as far as computers, generally I was playing games of some kind, but I was very young. However, when I got a little older and I ended up with my first, IBM PC, or should I say my first 386, I had a 386 SX, like a completely different world opened up to me. And that world was writing. Like I wanted to write because I say this a lot. I am a voracious reader. I read like a wolf eats. Okay. I read nonstop. And because of that, even when I was a kid, I can remember in third grade, you're supposed to be reading like these shorter books or something, not supposed to be reading gigantic novels of any kind. Well, at the time, baby, I wanted more Star Wars in my life. And the only Star Wars you could get outside of the movies back then, and, maybe the Ewok cartoons or the droid cartoons, was the Timothy Zahn novels. Like that, this is the time frame we're talking about here. And so, I was like, okay, well, this is Star Wars. I'm going to read it. And I didn't understand everything that I was reading, but you better believe I took the time to figure it out. I kept a whip. I was walking around for so long. I had, and Heir to the Empire, Timothy Zahn's first Star Wars novel, was, no small book. I mean, that was a very, very thick novel. I had that, and I had this Webster's Dictionary with a yellow cover on it. I'll never forget that book because I kept it with me all the time. But I would walk around with those two things in my hands at all time because I needed the dictionary to understand what the hell was being said, in the Star Wars book. But I mean, it gave me, just the passion for reading really instilled in me a passion for writing. I wanted to tell my own stories. And so when suddenly I had the 386, which had Windows 3.1 installed on it, and I saw, WordPad and Office and all that. I mean, like my world changed. I was like, holy shit, I could just write forever. And I could store it in my own little folder, my own little file. That was the other nice thing too, was that, when you say personal computer, when PC means personal computer, really for the time, that was very personal. Like, yes, you had file structures and all that on a Commodore 64 and everything, but I don't know. It seemed when there was a real GUI involved, like with Windows 3.1, when there was a very serious, well thought out GUI, and it just felt like, yeah, no, that's mine and no one else should really be looking at that. The Commodore 64 had some GUIs too. And I'm going to talk about the Commodore 64 in a future tech history. Don't worry about that because that was such a seminal machine for me. But what really hooked me, and said, I am always going to have one of these things, was when, I was able to write on on that Windows 3.1 machine. Just changed everything for me. And I'd messed with, I'd written on an Apple IIe. It's not like I hadn't done it before. It's just, there was just something there. And then also the fact that you had that, and then you could kind of, you could get out of Windows 3.1, set your high mem sys and all that right in DOS. And then I could rock a Star Trek game. Man, what else did I want in life? Nothing. Oh, there was, there was the good times. Then, not long after, and then you have TIE Fighter, you have other great games too. But then not long after, holy shit, then I get Prodigy. Oh, I could talk with other people in chat rooms. And yes, all of this stuff kind of existed on other platforms before. I obviously know that. Okay. But this is when it really all came together for me, kind of in one machine and in something that actually, kind of looked good. Not that things have to look good. In fact, today I would feel very differently. I can appreciate a good looking interface, but I also really love, a good old text prompt and, and I love, love the CLI. I love an ugly interface. Like I love it down, I love something that's not so resource hungry. Right. So, but that changed everything for me, seeing all of that. And then, honestly, and I've talked about this before, you go and, the first movie I ever got to go see on my own was Hackers. Was that 94, 95? And seeing that, like, even though that movie is total bullshit about what hacking actually is, it made it cool. It made it sexy. I talk about this all the time, like at some point somebody needs to make the movie. And if I'm hashing out $1 billion idea here or $1 million idea, well, I'll just be glad that somebody did it. Somebody needs to make, and I don't mean do it like Mr. Robot. Somebody, do it more like Hackers. Somebody needs to make a movie where like using a lot of these encryption tools, and all this is very sexy, where describing PGP is sexy, where even if it has to make it look kind of ridiculous, as long as it gets the idea out there that using PGP is cool, using Signal is cool. And if it's if it's a movie that just exudes cool, kind of like Hackers, awesome. Somebody do that. Okay. None of this bullshit where, this guy's getting out of jail and he has to work for the government or something. Make it a really like a very rebellious rogue movie, that's what I would love to see because, certainly what turned me on into getting into, cybersecurity and all that was, whoa, this is cool. Even though again, Hackers, total bullshit. I mean, nothing in that, reflects really reality. I mean, it kind of created the subgenre or the subculture really. I've talked about that many times. So, there was this perfect storm of all of these abilities that just came in when I was very young. And, and then there was just that essence of, this is cool. Then there's like that cool factor comes in and I was hooked. Like I didn't want to do really anything else. Like, it's like, yeah, all right, let's do this. Or even playing multiplayer, playing Rise of the Triad, with my uncle over the phone line. Oh man, fucking awesome. Anything that was possible seemed possible and it seemed limitless. That was the other thing too. Kind of like with the writing, like my desire to write is what I generally credit with. The thing is the reason, okay, yeah, I could do that with a typewriter, but with the computer, like you could just keep typing forever. And, like you never had to replace the paper. You didn't have to throw away anything. You didn't really waste anything necessarily. There's just something so appealing about that feeling of limitlessness and kind of that personal empowerment. And that stuck with me forever. That's what I mainly talk about on Sovryn Tech is empowering the individual, giving the individual tools, and giving them like options, giving them limitless options, which is how I felt, because especially even at the time, okay, Windows 3.1 can't do it. Well, I bet DOS can, and you go into DOS and you make it happen. So that's what really hooked me. We're just like kind of these different desires to do things. And at the time, the computer was really able to deliver all of that. The PC, the 386 in particular at the time. And of course, then I got a 486 DX. But that just made it all possible. It wasn't like computers for computer's sake. It's like, I want to do these things and this is the best way to do it. And then I ended up, kind of sticking with it. It's tremendous, how far and in how short a time really that the PC has come, how much I've seen, and I haven't, I'm 35. I haven't lived that long, I suppose. But just the quantum leaps in technology that I have seen, and really a lot of them are that I have seen in that time frame is just remarkable, and understand this, like I was kind of late to I was late to the Android game. Like I was really holding on to, I was using a Windows Phone 6 and even previous than that. I used Palm. I used all these different things. I did get a BlackBerry at one point, and I really loved that keyboard. But it was probably, I don't think I got my first Android phone until maybe 2011. And I barely ever messed with iOS. So I was sticking with a lot of those older platforms, for quite some time. But it was, it's amazing to see all of that. And the instant I got an Android phone, I was like, oh, this makes sense. I see where this is kind of going. So it's been a fantastic thing. And I often credit with, because a lot of people will, email me and say, man, where do these insights come from? You always have something very interesting to say. How does all that happen? And I credit it every single time to the fact that, I grew up with it. That's all it is. It's not like I went to any great school. It's not like, I did any of this. It's just that I was there when it was getting released and I was able to get my hands on it. That's really all you need. That's the best education you can get, is just to have the desire and the ability, to get your hands on something. You don't have to, to be a great programmer, to do all this other stuff. You really don't have to go to any kind of school. You don't have to, you don't have to do any of that shit. Okay. You don't even really have to take courses. You just got to have that absolute raw desire. And the interesting thing is that I think in the tech world in general, you can actually, without looking good on paper, I think you can still kind of make it, because especially thanks to the open source movement, you could build something and you could show it to people, and that's your resume. And you can say, oh yeah, or, people can look at it and go, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. You made that. All right. We want you, and that's just more of that limitlessness that, that the PC provides, not smartphones, PCs. So it's such a, the history of tech, even the history that I was able to live is just, it's just been incredible, to see all of the changes. To go from Prodigy to what we have now is mind boggling to me. I still, there's websites that show screenshots and all the stuff from from Prodigy itself. And I look back on it, I almost get one tear building up, but you can kind of see the foundations of where things would end up going. And in the abstract, some of the things that you do today really were all available back then through that, which is why I say, we're really just, we're kind of going back, we're going back today to sort of these walled gardens that existed, where all the services you could want existed through, one provider. In today's example would be Facebook, or maybe Twitter, or Verizon, or something like that, as to where back then the examples would have been, Prodigy, America Online, CompuServe, and then there was the Wild West of the internet, which, yeah, it's funny. I'll talk about that for a second. It's kind of funny. You really did, at least I did. And granted, I was a teenager at the time, but you really felt, this would be 96. You really felt that when you were going on to websites and you're going onto the internet, you're like, ooh, who knows what I could find out here? It really felt like the Wild West. You didn't know what you were going to end up with, when you went there, when you left the confines of Prodigy, or something like this. And it was amazing. BBSs, I got to give a shout out to BBSs, still probably my favorite technology. They still exist. BBSs being bulletin board systems. I remember particularly in upstate New York, there being one called Ray's BBS that I used to play Exidolus on, which was a text-based, kind of a MUD, and still just a ton. That game is tons of fun. And I've actually wanted to, with my own game company, Zomi Offline Games, I've wanted to kind of remake that sort of thing. Not a direct remake, but, remake that kind of adventure and experience and put it on a website. That's something I've been wanting to do for some time and might be developing in the back burner, but I'll leave that at that. and that was kind of the thing too, is it was great to always like have those options. I get worried when these companies today, they want you to stay, just stay within Verizon. Just stay within Facebook. Don't leave Facebook. Stay within Google's platform. You don't need to go anywhere else. Just do everything in Google. What was exciting was having those options to where like those different, it was almost like visiting other countries. It was, digital countries, of course, but it was like visiting other countries. You could go to, there was the wild west of the internet. You could go to Prodigy. If you got one of those, ubiquitous discs, from some store that had AOL on it, you could go there for 30 days. You could go to, and I used to make up, I'll say it straight. I used to make up fake credit card numbers to be able to access. They used to make, there used to be software that could get made, or that was made that could create, that would create bullshit, credit card numbers for you and all these different credentials so that you could keep using, these, these different trials, of services and all that. And I'd even do that with Prodigy too. So in fact, when my mother found out, that did not end up well. But yeah, I used to do all of that, and you try out all these different things. And then you could go on a BBS, because BBSs, when the internet first started, BBSs were still a thing. Like they were still a part of the program, as it were. And it was just kind of an alternative, right? Like it was just another place that you could go. And so I'd go to BBSs too. And I remember at first, I didn't realize that some of, like, say in the game Exidolus and BBSs, I didn't realize that a lot of those people, like there's other characters in the game, they weren't actually other people. I didn't know that at first. So, like I'd be trying to chat with them in the game and everything, and there'd be no response. And like, I remember I'd wait, and like, I'd go to school the next day and I'd come home and like, is anything there? Is there nothing there? Like, did they respond? Nope. So, and then, then there's the excitement of IRC channels, which I still run one. It's, it's Sovnet on Freenode. IRC was huge, because what ended up happening then is you didn't have to pay for Prodigy or AOL. You could just get a raw internet connection, which at the time was $15, which a lot of people thought was expensive, but whatever. Anyway, it was, EarthNet, or no, NTCnet. Sorry, I was thinking of Earthlink. No, NTCnet was the company that I went through. And with NTCnet, you got access to the internet, and then you had to figure out things from there. So what did you do to get chat rooms? Well, you went to IRC, and I met amazing people, amazing friends, and even lovers through IRC. And that's how I got into, enjoying cybersex and all that, which, like I always say, that's the lost art, right? So that, man, it was so great to have so many of these, like, completely, not that BBS is, I guess the internet infrastructure, as you kind of understand it now, it was sort of all the same, but it was just so great to be able to go to like entirely different, like I said, these different digital countries at the time. That was very exciting. I think that stuck with me because I've always, I've been espousing and rooting for creating multiple internets. Okay. Where, you can have your big bad internet, but then there's going to be this network over here and this network over here that runs on a completely different infrastructure. Perhaps it uses Li-Fi, like laser internet, or it's some form of mesh networking through Bluetooth or something like that. But all these different, I really want that option to be able to go to these entire different infrastructures that I had in many ways when I was a teenager, when I was younger. Anyway, we'll see. I think a lot of this, the hope is that with what's happening today, where it seems like we're going back to the AOL days, maybe we can go all the way back even more to the BBS style days, or at least have the option for that. I get it that not everybody's going to be on board with that sort of thing, but oh man, hell, there's days where I think I'd love to, run a BBS or something, but obviously I have more projects than I can handle right now to where I'd be able to do that. So, but anyway, there's your little insight into my bit of tech history. I didn't go into, what I ended up doing, getting employed in the tech world. That story's for a later time, but what, kind of initially ignited my passion and just some of the things that have really stuck with me over the years, as far as tech goes, as far as like how things used to be, and kind of how I wish they still would be, even if they'd evolve to be, take advantage of a lot of newer technologies and all that. So I was going to talk about, I'm going to have to save it. I was going to talk about the Herculaneum which is going to be kind of a little classic history story. But I am going to save that. In fact, maybe I'll make that a part of next week's episode. Remember, next week's episode, I am going to do the second hour of the episode is going to be one long review of Star Wars, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, because I'm catching that baby Thursday, and it's going to be a great time. I can't wait. There's the potential that this could be the greatest Star Wars movie ever made. And I've actually talked to some other people recently, and they said the same thing. And these are very discerning people. So catch it if you can, because I'm going to be talking about it on Saturday. And I wouldn't want you to not be on board with the spoilers. So, but I'll make sure there's a nice big spoiler alert for everybody, when we get to that. So, I will see you on the other side next week.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.